At Dad's retirement party, he toasted, "Only children who make me proud are mine." He turned to me. "You can leave." I stood, shaken. My husband stood too, and what he did next stunned everyone. The crystal glass in my father's hand sparkled with golden reflections of champagne, and I already knew that something terrible was about to happen. Matthew Carpenter, my father, had a special talent for turning any celebration into a theatrical performance, where he played the leading role and we were all extras. "Only the children who have made me proud are truly mine," he proclaimed, glancing around the set table. The guests applauded and raised their glasses. Margot beamed, Mason smiled smugly, and then my father looked straight at me. "Violet, you may leave." The silence that followed was deafening. 30 pairs of eyes stared at me. I slowly got up from my chair, feeling my cheeks burn. But then my husband Ethan got up too. What he did next, I will remember forever. But first, I should tell you how we all ended up at that damn table. I was 8 when I first realized that love had a price in our family. Margot got a new bike for winning the school drawing contest. Mason got a computer for finishing the semester with excellent grades. And me? I brought home a stray puppy and got a week of silence from my father. "Violet, we are the Carpenters, not an animal shelter," he said, throwing the puppy out onto the street as I cried. "If you want to get anything in this life, learn to be useful." Usefulness in my father's mind meant submission. Margot understood this quickly and became a designer just as he wanted. "My company needs creative solutions," my father said, and Margot obediently drew logos for his ore processing plants. Her talent was undeniable. She could create a masterpiece out of nothing. But instead of working at prestigious agencies in New York or Los Angeles, she sat in a small office at her father's company, designing brochures for clients. Mason followed in his footsteps. An engineer, the future heir to the empire. Since childhood, his father had taken him to factories, shown him workshops and blueprints, and taught him to read diagrams. "This is your future, son," he would say, patting Mason on the shoulder. And Mason believed him. He graduated from the same university as his father, even lived in the same dormitory, in the same room. It was as if he was trying to repeat his father's life, down to the smallest detail. And me? I chose veterinary college. I remember the day I told my father. It was a warm April evening, and we were all gathered on the terrace. My father sat in his favorite leather chair, slowly swirling whiskey in his glass. The ice clinked against the sides like little bells. "Veterinary?" He said the word as if it were dirty. "My daughter is going to dig around in dogs' guts?" "It's a noble profession, Dad. I love animals. I want to help them." "Noble?" He laughed, coldly, sharply, like the crack of a whip. "You know what's noble? Running factories, giving jobs to thousands of people, creating jobs, paying taxes, building the country's economy, not messing around with flea-ridden animals for pennies." Mom Linda sat nearby, examining her manicure. She never interfered in such conversations. Her role was simple: to be beautiful, host parties, wear the jewelry her father gave her, and keep quiet. "I've already submitted my application," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. My father put his glass down on the table with such force that it seemed as if the glass would crack. "You submitted your documents? Without my permission?" "I don't need your permission." "I'm 18. That evening, he announced at dinner that if I went to veterinary school, I wouldn't get a penny for my education. Not a penny. Margot stared at her plate, swallowing oysters, which I hated. Mason chewed his steak, pretending it didn't concern him. Mom Linda poured herself another glass of wine, her third of the evening. "You're crazy," Dad said. "You'll be back in a month, begging for forgiveness." I didn't come back. I worked as a waitress during the day and a cleaner at night. I was a babysitter on weekends. My hands hurt from the cleaning products. My legs ached from standing all the time. My back ached from carrying heavy trays. But I didn't give up. My father expected me to break down and crawl back. He waited in vain. In my second year, I could already afford to rent a tiny room instead of a bed in the dormitory. It even had a window. It overlooked the brick wall of the neighboring building, but it was still a window. I celebrated this move with a pack of cheap noodles and a bottle of cola from the supermarket. I met Ethan at the Blue Cup Cafe, where I had been working part-time for the third year in a row. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, no milk, and sat for 4 hours poring over some papers, forgetting about everything else in the world. From time to time, he ran his hand through his hair, leaving it tousled. A mountain of used napkins with notes grew on the table. I was about to ask him to vacate the table. It was Friday. The line of visitors stretched to the door. My boss, Bob, was glancing sideways at the occupied table when he looked up and said, "I'm sorry. I seem to be taking advantage of your hospitality. It's just so quiet here. Much better than the library. There's always someone rustling bags or breathing loudly." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed sincerely all day. "You can stay as long as you like if you order something else. Otherwise, my boss will eat me alive. Then bring me the most expensive dessert you have, and coffee, and what do you recommend for dinner?" He was a young lawyer, fresh out of college. Not handsome, too long a nose, too sharp cheekbones, not rich, a cheap suit from a sale, worn-out shoes, an ordinary guy with too long hair and tired eyes. But when he smiled, something inside me stirred. We started dating a month later. Our first date was a walk in the park because neither of us had money for a restaurant. The second was a free exhibition at a community center. The third was a picnic on the roof of his office building where he took me via a secret staircase. "Your father will hate me," he said after I told him about my family. "He already hates me, so you have nothing to worry about," I replied. But my heart sank. We got married a year later. A modest ceremony at the city hall, 2 witnesses from the street, rings from a pawn shop. My father didn't come to the wedding. He sent a letter on company letterhead. "I hope you understand what you're doing." The door to my house is always open when you come to your senses. Coming to my senses meant leaving Ethan, veterinary medicine, and becoming like Margot, obedient, proper, useful. Selling my soul for my father's money. And now, 5 years later, we were sitting at the festive table celebrating my father's retirement. The Golden Stork restaurant was the most expensive in town. Crystal chandeliers, silk tablecloths, waiters in white gloves. "The chief engineer is retiring," proclaimed banners with gold lettering. Margot brought a whole presentation of her projects for her father's company. A folder with glossy printouts that no one looked at. She nervously flipped through the pages, trying to get her father's attention, but he was busy talking to some partners. Mason boasted that he was about to take his father's place. "The board of directors has already hinted at it," he said, although everyone knew that it was his father who was promoting his candidacy. "What about you, Violet?" my father asked when it was my turn. His voice was sweet as poison and honey. "Still playing Dr. Ibolite?" "I have my own practice at the clinic," I replied calmly, squeezing Ethan's hand under the table. "Practice." He said the word with such disgust as if I had said I was a prostitute. "Listen, everyone, my youngest daughter has a practice. She gives hamsters shots. She brushes cats' teeth. What an achievement." The guests laughed awkwardly. Someone coughed. Uncle Paul, my father's partner, started telling a story about golf, trying to change the subject. Margot studied the pattern on the tablecloth as if she were seeing it for the first time. "Actually, I specialize in large animals. Last week, I operated on a horse worth $100,000. I tried, even though I knew it was useless. 100,000? My father feigned surprise, spreading his arms wide. "Wow. Listen, everyone. 100,000. Do you know how much a single batch of ore processed by my factories costs? 15 million. In one day. One. But no, my daughter prefers to dig around in horse intestines for pennies." He stood up and took a glass. His red face glistened with sweat and alcohol. His eyes were glassy like a doll's. "I want to make a toast," he proclaimed so loudly that the conversations in the neighboring hall fell silent. "To my children. To Mason, who will continue my work and become a worthy successor. To Margot, who creates beauty for our company and makes us attractive to customers. To those who have justified my investments, my hopes, my upbringing." Everyone stood up and the glasses clinked. I also stood up, holding my glass. "Only those children who have made me proud are truly mine," my father declared solemnly. Then he turned to me. His gaze was as cold as a February morning. "Violet, you may leave. This is a celebration for the real family." The glass fell from my hands and shattered. Champagne spilled across the snow-white tablecloth like blood. "Matvey, maybe that's enough?" my mother said quietly, but my father waved his hand. "No, Linda. Let everyone know the truth. For 22 years, I invested money, hopes, and time in this girl. And what did I get? A veterinarian earning $40,000 a year, a disgrace to the Carpenter family. She's not even worthy of sitting at this table." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to walk steadily. Then Ethan stood up. "Mr. Carpenter." His voice was calm, but I could hear the steel in it. "What an interesting envelope I have here." He pulled a white envelope with the Orion Mining Company seal from his jacket's inside pocket, the same company where my father worked. "What kind of circus is this?" my father exclaimed. "Security." "This isn't a circus. It's a message from your company, more specifically from its legal department. I've been working on this case for 3 months, but I didn't know you were the defendant. Until today." Ethan tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers. "A lawsuit for $4.5 million, selling corporate secrets to competitors over the past 5 years, industrial espionage, embezzlement, fraud." There was complete silence. Even the waiters froze. "Documents, signatures, wire transfers to offshore accounts. It's all documented, Mr. Carpenter. The company didn't retire you. They fired you 3 days ago, and now they want every penny back." Margot gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Mason jumped up from his chair so abruptly that he knocked over his wine glass. A dark red stain spread across the tablecloth, mixing with the champagne from my broken glass. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call at 6:30. The screen lit up with Margot. I didn't even have time to say hello before a torrent of hysterics poured out at me. "Did you know? Did you know your husband was handling this case? How could you not warn me? Margot, calm down. Ethan doesn't discuss his work with me. Client confidentiality." "Confidentiality?" She laughed hysterically. "Our family is falling apart, and you're talking about confidentiality? Dad wants everyone to come. Immediately. Even you. Even me." After yesterday's humiliation, he still thought he could boss me around. Ethan had already left, leaving a note saying he had gone to the office early. "I love you. I'm sorry about yesterday, but someone had to do it." I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Someone had to do it. But why him? And why like that? My parents' house looked as luxurious as ever. White columns, marble stairs, a fountain with cherubs that my father had brought from Italy for an insane amount of money. Only now I saw it differently. Not luxury, but a mask-hiding rot. A gilded cage in which we all lived. The gardener, Jose, was sweeping the path, but when he saw me, he turned away. News travels fast. Yesterday he would have bowed and smiled. Today I was the daughter of a thief. Everyone had already gathered in my father's study. A huge room with oak paneling, portraits of ancestors that my father had commissioned from an artist, even though his grandfather was an ordinary miner from Pennsylvania. My father sat at a massive table, the same table at which he had humiliated me for years. Only now he looked not like a formidable ruler, but like a hunted animal. "It's a misunderstanding," he repeated like a mantra. "I gave 30 years to the company. 30 years. I made it what it is. Dad." Mason stood by the window, his hands in his pockets. His face was gray with dark circles under his eyes. Just tell the truth. Did you take money from competitors? His father was silent for a long time, looking at his hands. A $300 manicure, a gold signet ring, a Swiss watch worth the price of a small apartment. It's complicated. What could be complicated? Margot sat on the leather sofa, hugging her knees like a little girl. Her perfect makeup was smudged, her mascara running. Yes or no? They paid for consultations. It's not a crime to consult. Many people do it after they retire. But you didn't retire, Mason exploded. You were working. You were giving them blueprints of our new designs. Not ours, her father snapped. Mine, I created them. I had the right. Right? Mom, who had been silent in the corner, suddenly spoke up. She was wearing no makeup, just simple house clothes. I hadn't seen her like this in years. You're talking about rights? What right did you have to spend the family money on your prostitutes? The silence was deafening. Linda. My father began, but she raised her hand. Be quiet. I've been silent for 30 years. 30 years of turning a blind eye to your betrayals. Julia from accounting. Do you think I didn't know? The apartment you rented for her on Fifth Avenue? Michelle, your secretary? The $12,000 diamond necklace for her birthday? And that girl from Miami? How old was she? 20. Mom! Margot covered her ears. Stop it! Why should I stop? Because the truth is unpleasant. I endured all this for you, my children, for stability, for the money, to be honest. Because where would I go? A 50-year-old woman with no education, no work experience. But now, she laughed bitterly. Now there won't be any money, right? $4.5 million. That's all we have, and even more. We have assets, her father tried. The house, cars, stocks. Which will be seized, Mom said coldly. I've already consulted with a lawyer. My lawyer, not yours. If you lose, and you will lose because you're guilty, they'll take everything. And you know what? I'm filing for divorce. My father jumped up from his chair so abruptly that it fell over. You can't. Not now. I can't? Look at me, Matthew. Look closely. I've already filed the papers. Last night, while you were getting drunk in your office. Mason sat down on the sofa next to Margot and buried his head in his hands. This is a disaster. A complete disaster. You have no idea how much, said his father, suddenly looking 10 years older. They'll fire everyone connected to me. Everyone. What are you talking about? Mason raised his head. Do you think they'll keep you at the factory? The son of a thief? Margot? Do you think the company will renew your contracts? They'll distance themselves from us like we're lepers. But we didn't do anything, Margot cried. It's you. You ruined everything. I provided for this family. You provided for your mistresses, his mother shouted, and we were just props for your successful image. Mason's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and turned pale. It's work. He left the room, but we could all hear his voice from the hallway. What do you mean immediately? But I understand. Yes, I understand. When he returned, his face was deathly pale. I've been suspended until the investigation is complete, without pay. Margot sobbed. Her phone rang too. It's James, my manager. She answered, and with each word her face became more and more confused. But we have a contract. I understand, but force majeure? What reputational risks? She put the phone down. They're terminating all contracts. All of them. 5 projects I've been working on for months. My father sat back down in the chair that someone had lifted up. He looked devastated. I just wanted to secure my old age. Whose? My mother asked sarcastically. Yours or Julia's? Because I found the statements, Matvey. 50,000 transfers over the last 3 months to an account in Switzerland. You were going through my papers? I was protecting myself. For years, I collected evidence, photographed checks, kept hotel receipts. You know, it was my little insurance policy. If you tried to leave me for someone younger, I would have evidence for the court. I didn't think it would be necessary under these circumstances. I sat in a chair by the door, watching this spectacle. The family that seemed so strong, so successful, was falling apart before my eyes like a house of cards, and I felt no pity, only emptiness. "Violet," my father suddenly addressed me, "your husband, he could help. He's a lawyer. He's handling this case." "He represents the other side, Dad." "But he's your husband." "Family." I laughed. I couldn't help myself. "Family? Yesterday you said I wasn't your daughter, that I was a disgrace, that I wasn't worthy of sitting at the same table with you." "It was. I had been drinking. You were sober. Like always when you humiliated me. Remember how you called my job flea peddling? How you said I was a disappointment? Violet, this is different. This is serious." Was my life not serious? When I worked 16 hours a day to pay for my education? When I ate noodles for 3 weeks in a row because I had no money? Where were you then? You chose this path yourself. Yes, I did, and I don't regret it. You know why? Because I earned every penny honestly, every dollar, every cent. I can sleep peacefully knowing that I didn't cheat anyone, betray anyone, or sell anyone out. Margot's phone rang again, and again, and again. Each call meant another client breaking off cooperation, another bridge burning. "What are we going to do?" she asked, looking at her father. "How are we going to live?" "I rent an apartment. I have a car loan." "Sell the car," her mother said coldly, "and find a normal job, one where your last name won't be a burden." "What job? Who will hire me after this scandal?" "Someone will." "If you're really talented and not just Daddy's daughter." It was cruel, but true. Margot cried. Mason went out onto the terrace and lit a cigarette. He had quit smoking 3 years ago, but stress got the better of him. Her father sat in his chair like King Lear after his abdication. His entire empire, built on lies and betrayal, was collapsing, and he finally saw the true faces of those he had considered loyal. "I need a lawyer," he said at last. "A good lawyer." "Good luck," my mother said. "With your reputation, only a public defender will take you." I got up. "Where are you going?" my father asked. "To work." "I have an operation at 10, a German Shepherd, spleen cancer. The owners are very upset. It's their only friend after their son died in Afghanistan." "Surgery," my father repeated, as if the word were foreign to him. "A dog." "Yes, Dad, a dog. That same senseless animal that's not worth wasting time on. But you know what? For this family, this dog is more important than all your millions, because she's loyal, honest. She loves unconditionally." I walked to the door but turned around on the threshold. "One more thing. Ethan offered you a deal a month ago. Through intermediaries. Admit guilt, return some of the money, avoid trial. You refused. You said you would never admit to being a thief. Well, now everyone will know who you really are." The last thing I saw as I left was my father's face. Shocked, confused, as if for the first time in his life he realized he had lost. And not just money or reputation. He lost everything. Family, respect, love, if there ever was any. The sun was shining outside. Jose was still sweeping the path. When he saw me, he smiled timidly. "Good morning, Miss Violet." "And to you, Jose." I got into my old Honda. Ethan wanted to buy a new car, but I refused, as this one had served me faithfully for 6 years. I started the engine and drove off. In the rearview mirror, my parents' house grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared around the bend. Forever, I thought at the time. But life still had many surprises in store. 3 weeks had passed since the evening when Matthew Carpenter's empire began to crumble. I tried to live a normal life, surgeries, appointments, shifts at the clinic. But news of the scandal followed me everywhere. The local newspaper printed a scathing article on the front page: "The Fall of the Carpenter Dynasty. Corruption, Betrayal, Collapse." Even my colleagues at the clinic gave me sympathetic looks, even though I asked them not to get involved. That Thursday, I came home later than usual. I had to perform emergency surgery on a Labrador that had been hit by a car. Ethan was sitting in the kitchen looking through some documents. In front of him was an unfinished cup of coffee and an uneaten sandwich. "Tough day?" I asked, kissing him on the temple. "Your father hired a lawyer." "Robert Stone." "That Stone? The one who got Senator Mills acquitted?" "The very same. $5,000 an hour for a consultation. I wonder where your father got the money." I shrugged as I opened the refrigerator. The leftovers from yesterday's pasta didn't look very appetizing, but I was too tired to cook. He probably borrowed it, or he's selling something. "Violet," Ethan put down his papers, "there's something you need to know." Stone hinted that they're going to try to challenge the evidence. He said it was obtained illegally. But that's not true, is it? Of course it's not true, but they'll try. And another thing. He hesitated. "Stone said your father wants to talk to us, in person. Tell him to go to hell." He said it's important, that it's not just about him. The next day, Saturday, at 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and my father was standing on the threshold. But this was not the Matvey Carpenter I had known all my life. In 3 weeks, he had lost 10 kilograms. His hair had turned completely gray, and deep shadows lay under his eyes. His expensive suit hung on him like a coat hanger. "Violet, may I come in? This isn't just my house." "Ethan?" My father looked over my shoulder. "Can I talk to both of you?" Ethan left the office, crossing his arms over his chest. 15 minutes, Mr. Carpenter. And no recording devices. My father nodded, took out his phone, and placed it on the table by the door. We sat down in the living room, Ethan and I on the sofa, my father in the armchair opposite. He was silent for a long time, looking at his hands. The gold signet ring was gone. He must have sold it. "I need your help," he finally said. "We've already talked about this," Ethan replied coldly. "I represent the other side." "I know, but you could." "There are documents that can be interpreted in different ways, if you help to present them correctly." "Are you asking me to falsify evidence?" Ethan stood up. "This conversation is over." "Wait!" His father also stood up. "I'm not asking you to falsify anything. Just review it. Maybe something was misunderstood. Mr. Carpenter, what you're suggesting is a crime, falsifying evidence. I could lose my license or even go to jail, and I could lose everything." "You already have," I said quietly, "through your own stupidity and greed." My father turned to me, and there was despair in his eyes. "Violet, my daughter—" "Don't you dare," I interrupted. "Don't you dare call me your daughter." 3 weeks ago, I was the shame of the family, the one who deals with fleas, a failure who didn't justify your investment. I was wrong. "Wrong?" I laughed, and that laugh was as bitter as wormwood. "You destroyed my childhood, Dad." Every day I heard that I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not obedient enough. Remember my graduation? I received an award for the best grades in biology, and you said in front of everyone, "Biology is for those who are incapable of real science." I wanted to motivate you. Motivate? When I was 12, I won a drawing contest. I drew a dog, the same puppy you threw away. The teacher said I had talent, and you tore up the drawing and said, "Artists starve. Don't waste your time on nonsense." Ethan took my hand and squeezed my fingers. 15 years old, Dad. My birthday. You gave Margot a diamond bracelet, Mason a new computer, and me a book called How to Be Successful in Business, with a note, "Maybe this will help you become normal." I thought it would help. 18 years old. I said I wanted to be a veterinarian. You cut me off from money, but that wasn't the worst part. You told Mom, Margot, Mason, anyone who would listen, that I was a mistake, that it would be better if I didn't exist. My father turned pale. I never said that. Thanksgiving, 2019. You had 3 glasses of whiskey and told Uncle Paul, "My 2 children are my pride and joy, and the third is a reminder that even the best families have mistakes." I was standing behind the door and heard every word. The silence was heavy as lead. My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. "And now you come and ask for help. Why should I help you?" "Because I'm your father." "No," I shook my head. "A father is someone who supports you, who loves you unconditionally, who is proud not of your achievements but of you as a person. You were an ATM with conditions, the manager of a project called The Perfect Family, but not a father." My phone rang. Margot. "Violet, you won't believe it. They didn't even hire me as a salesperson in a clothing store. They said my last name was a reputational risk, a salesperson." "I'm sorry, Margot." "Sorry. I don't need your pity. You're there with your animals. It doesn't affect you." "Margot, no, you know what? You've always been special. You've always gone against everyone. And now that we're all in deep shit, you're happy, aren't you?" She hung up. My father looked at me hopefully. "See? Margot is suffering. Mason can't find a job. Your mother..." "Mom already filed for divorce, and she did the right thing. She's taking half of what's left. It's her legal right. She put up with your cheating for 30 years. What infidelities?" "They were just..." "Julia, Dad. The apartment on 5th Avenue for $3,000 a month. Michelle, the trip to Cancun, 5 stars, presidential suite. And that girl from Miami, Tiffany or whatever her name is, the Cartier watch for $20,000. My father stared at me. "Where did you..." "Mom showed me the documents. She's been collecting them for years. Every check, every receipt. You know, she wanted to divorce you 5 years ago, but she stayed for us. For stability. And you didn't even notice that she hadn't loved you for a long time. But why now? When things are so hard for me? Because now she finally can. There's no more of your money to keep her. No more image of a successful family to maintain. She's free." Ethan stood up. "Mr. Carpenter, I think it's time for you to go." His father also stood up but did not move. "I did sell the blueprints," he said suddenly. "At first it was small stuff. Outdated schematics. Nothing important. 50,000 here, 100 there. For Julia, she loved expensive things. Then the appetite grew. Michelle wanted more. Tiffany. She was so young, so beautiful. I felt alive again. And for that, you betrayed the company that gave you everything. The company used me. For 30 years, I made them rich, and they paid me pennies compared to their profits." "Pennies?" Ethan took out a folder. $800,000 a year in base salary, bonuses up to $3 million, stock options, company car, housing allowance, first-class travel. That's pennies? The owners made billions, and they risked their own money. You were an employee, highly paid but an employee. I created half of their technology, and I got paid for it. But it wasn't enough for you. It was never enough for you." My father moved toward the door but stopped. "When I lose the lawsuit, and I will lose, Stone has already hinted at that, I'll go to prison. 3 years minimum, maybe 5. "These are the consequences of your actions," I said. "I know, but..." "Violet, if something happens to me, you're the only one who..." "No," I interrupted. "Don't put the responsibility for your mistakes on me. I won't be your backup plan." He nodded and picked up the phone from the table. "I always knew you were the strongest of my children. The most honest. Maybe that's why I treated you so cruelly. I was afraid you would see who I really was." "I always saw it," I replied quietly. "I just hoped I was wrong." When the door closed behind him, I burst into tears. For the first time in 3 weeks, I allowed myself to cry. Ethan hugged me, stroked my head, whispered something soothing. "He's not worth your tears," he said finally. "I'm not crying for him. I'm crying for the father I never had, for the family I could have had if it weren't for his greed and pride." The phone rang again. This time it was Mason. "Violet? Can you lend me some money? My electricity has been cut off and my account is empty." "Mason, you had savings." "I did. But my dad's lawyer, he asked to borrow it, said he'd pay me back after the trial." "And you gave it to him?" "He's my dad, Violet." I couldn't say no. I looked at Ethan. He shook his head but took out his checkbook. "How much do you need?" $2,000. I'll pay you back, I promise, as soon as I find a job." "You don't have to pay it back." "It's not a loan, it's help. But don't ask for any more. And don't give Dad a cent, you hear?" "Thank you. Violet, I'm sorry for everything, for not protecting you, for staying silent when Dad humiliated you. I'm a coward." "No, Mason. You're just a son who loved his father. That's not a crime." When I hung up, Ethan kissed me on the forehead. "You're too kind." "No, I just know what it's like to be cut off from my family, and I don't want Mason to go through the same thing." It was raining outside. The raindrops ran down the glass like tears. Somewhere out there, my father was driving to his empty house. Margot was crying in her rented apartment, and Mason was counting his last dollars. The Carpenter empire had fallen into ruins, and I was sitting in a small, cozy apartment with a man who loved me for who I was, and I realized that I was the richest of them all. The day of the trial arrived on a cold November morning. I had no plans to go. What did I care about my father's fate? But Ethan convinced me. "You need to see this, to close this chapter once and for all." The courtroom was packed. Journalists, my father's former colleagues, and just curious onlookers. The Carpenter scandal had become the most talked about event in the city in the last decade. I sat in the back row with my hood up. I didn't want to be recognized. My father sat at the defense table next to Stone. In the 3 months since his visit to us, he had become like a ghost. His suit, clearly secondhand, hung loosely on him. His hands trembled as he poured water from a glass. Mom sat in the second row, elegant as always, but in a simple black suit instead of her usual designer clothes. Next to her was her lawyer, a young woman with cold eyes. Margot wasn't there. Mason sat across the aisle from Mom, smelling of vodka even from that distance. "All rise," announced the bailiff. Judge Garrison, an elderly man with a face carved from granite, took his seat. Case number 2023-847, Orion Mining versus Matthew Carpenter. Charges of industrial espionage, theft of corporate property, fraud. Mr. Stone, is your client ready to hear the verdict? Stone stood up, buttoning his $2,000 jacket. "Your Honor, we would like to emphasize once again..." "Mr. Stone, we have been listening to your arguments for 3 months. The evidence is irrefutable. Bank transfers, correspondence, testimony from 3 people who purchased information from your client. What else can you add?" Stone sat down. Even he, with his reputation, couldn't get his father out of this hole. "Matthew Carpenter." The judge looked directly at my father. "You are found guilty on all counts. I sentence you to pay Orion Mining $4,500,000 in compensation. Also, 3 years in prison with the possibility of early release after 18 months for good behavior." The gavel struck the table. My father staggered and grabbed the table. "But I don't have that kind of money. The court is seizing all your property. Your house, cars, accounts, investments, everything will be sold to pay off the debt. If that's not enough, the rest of the amount will become your debt, which you will pay off after your release." "Your Honor," Stone stood up again, "my client is an elderly man. Prison would effectively be a death sentence for him." "Your client is 58 years old, Mr. Stone. He is not elderly. Besides, it's minimum security. It's not Alcatraz. As my father was led away in handcuffs, our eyes met. 1 second. In his eyes, I saw fear, confusion, a silent plea. I looked away. Outside, reporters rushed toward my mother. "Mrs. Carpenter, how do you feel? How do you feel about the verdict? Is it true that you have filed for divorce?" My mother raised her hand and everyone fell silent. I am no longer Mrs. Carpenter. The divorce was finalized a week ago. I have reverted to my maiden name, Linda Warren. As for the verdict, justice has prevailed. Now excuse me, I must go. Her lawyer walked her to her car. I noticed it wasn't a Mercedes like before, but a modest Toyota. Violet. Mason caught up with me in the parking lot. He reeked of alcohol. His eyes were red. "Were you there?" "Yes. 3 years. He got 3 years. Mason laughed hysterically, frighteningly. "You know what's worst? I'm glad. I'm glad he's in prison. What kind of son am I after that? A normal son whose father betrayed him. I lost everything because of him. My job, my savings, my reputation. Do you know how much I drink? A bottle a day. Sometimes more. Mason, you need help. There are programs." "Programs?" He laughed again. "That takes money, and I don't have any. Zero. Yesterday I sold my watch, the last thing I had left, for $300. It was worth $10,000. I can help." "No, enough. I've already taken enough from you." He swayed. "Do you know what Margot did?" "No. She's getting married. To Richard Plummer. He's 63. He owns a chain of car dealerships. Bald, pot-bellied, his hands are always sweaty. But he has money. It's her choice." "Choice?" She cries every night. I can hear her. We live in neighboring apartments in that awful neighborhood near the train station. Thin walls. She sobs and takes tranquilizers. But in the morning, she puts on a smile and goes to meet Plummer. My phone rang. The clinic. "Violet, we have an emergency. They brought in a sheepdog poisoned with antifreeze. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I looked at Mason. He was standing there, swaying, staring into space. "Mason, go home, get some sleep, call me tomorrow, and I'll give you the contact information for a free help center." "Tomorrow?" he repeated. "Yes, tomorrow." But he didn't call tomorrow. A week later, he was taken to the hospital with alcohol poisoning. They barely managed to pump his stomach. Meanwhile, life went on. Margot and Plummer's wedding took place a month after the trial. It was a modest ceremony at the city hall with 5 guests. I didn't go. Margot didn't invite me. Mom didn't go either. "She's making a terrible mistake," Mom said when we ran into each other at the supermarket. She was buying the cheapest groceries, counting every dollar. But I can't stop her anymore. She's an adult. "How are you, Mom?" "Really?" She smiled. The first time in a long time I had seen her smile sincerely. "You know, Violet, I'm free. For the first time in 30 years. Yes, I don't have any money. I live with my sister and work as a saleswoman in a bookstore. But I'm free. I don't have to pretend to be a happy wife anymore. I don't have to turn a blind eye to his infidelities. I don't have to smile at his stupid corporate parties. Don't you regret it? I only regret one thing, that I didn't leave sooner. Maybe then you would have grown up in a more honest family. Maybe Margot wouldn't have sold herself for money, and Mason wouldn't have sought solace in a bottle. What about me? You? Mom touched my cheek. You're the only one of us who remained pure, because you're the only one who had the courage to leave. 3 months later, I received a letter from prison, my father's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a long time, then threw it away without opening it. Ethan said nothing, just hugged me. The clinic was thriving. After the story with the $100,000 horse, the operation was a success. The horse made a full recovery. Owners of elite animals began to come to me. Ironically, the same people who had previously respected my father now entrusted me with their beloved pets. "Your father was a greedy fool," Mrs. Goldman said one day, bringing her poodle in for a vaccination. "But you, dear, you're different. You have a heart. A heart. Something my father never had." One evening, 6 months after the trial, I saw him on television. The news was showing a story about a minimum security prison where white-collar criminals were serving their sentences. My father was in the background wearing an orange jumpsuit with gray stubble, raking leaves. "Turn it off," I asked Ethan. "He's not your father anymore." "He never was." "I've just finally accepted that." Margot gave birth a year later, a girl. She named her Grace. She sent a photo, a tiny face in a pink blanket. "I want her to know her aunt," she wrote in the message. We started talking, carefully, slowly. She was still with Plummer, but something had changed in her eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. Mason got out of rehab 8 months later. He got a job as a mechanic in a car repair shop. Far from the engineering heights he had dreamed of, but it was honest work. He started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. One day he came to the clinic. "I just wanted to say thank you for not turning away. We're family, Mason." Yes, a bad, broken family, but a family. My father was released after 18 months, early release for good behavior. He got a job as a truck driver for a logistics company, a small apartment on the outskirts, an old pickup truck. Lonely evenings. He didn't write anymore. He didn't call. Once I saw him at a gas station. He was filling up his truck. He looked older, stooped, wearing a worn denim jacket. Our eyes met through the window of my car. He nodded. I drove by. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked that evening. "Yes. I thought that when I saw him like that, broken, I would feel satisfaction or pity. But I felt nothing. Emptiness. That's normal. Is it normal to feel nothing for your own father? He burned all his bridges, Violet. You don't have to rebuild them." That evening, I took out all the old photos, childhood, school, family. In each one was a smiling, successful Matvey carpenter with his perfect family. It was all a lie. I didn't burn the photos or tear them up. I just put them back in the box and put it in the attic. Let them lie there. A reminder that money and success are worthless without love and honesty. Life went on. The clinic, the patients, Ethan. We started thinking about children. I wanted to give them what I didn't have myself. Unconditional love, support, the right to be themselves. And every time I rescued another animal, I thought, this is it. This is what really matters. Not money, not status, but the opportunity to help, to love, to be needed. Something my father never understood. The carpenter's empire fell, but something new grew out of its ruins. Not as glamorous, not as rich, but real. My birthday fell on a cool Saturday at the end of October. The morning began with caramel-scented coffee and a cat stretched out on the windowsill, basking in the sun. I woke up before Ethan, turned on the oven, and mixed dough for a pumpkin and cinnamon pie. A silly, childish gesture that calms my hands when my head is full of unspeakable thoughts. It had been a long day at the clinic yesterday. A dog with a twisted stomach, a cat with poisoning, owners who cried and thanked me, and I walked home, hugging the cold in my pockets, thinking that once this cold had frightened me, but now, on the contrary, it brought me together. There was a card from Margot on the table, printed in an elegant font without a hint of warmth. She married a financier from the suburbs, a house with a pool, a car the color of wet asphalt, and now every sentence she uttered had as much naturalness as artificial marble. She wrote that she would join us in the evening, if she had time, after a charity reception, where smiles and business cards would be handed out. With Mason, everything was simpler and more painful. He disappeared for several months, then resurfaced at the bottom, where alcohol smelled like cheap apple cider and yesterday's anger. He had been in rehab twice but never finished a course. Yesterday, he sent a short message. I'm not coming. Sorry. I caught myself feeling irritation breaking through my pity like a metal button piercing thin fabric. I knew he would come today. Father, Matt Wendraden, now without his job and without his home, with hands that had lost the smell of machine oil and acquired the smell of highways, dust, coffee from stations, the swearing of truckers rushing through the night to arrive in the morning where only delivery notes await them. A year ago, he didn't know how to ask. A year ago, he only knew how to command and take offense. But now he had learned to look people in the eye and say a simple, "I'm sorry." And there was no masculine heroism in that word, only the emptiness he had dug for himself. Ethan got up when I was already setting the table. His hair stuck out in all directions like grass after rain. "Happy birthday, Vi," he said and kissed me on the cheek. "How many candles?" I replied that it was exactly as many as I wanted, and we both smiled. We agreed not to count the years the way my father did, in diplomas, positions, awards, and usefulness. We had a different measure, how many times a day we tell the truth, even when we are afraid. The doorbell rang earlier than I expected. I wiped my hands on a towel and took a short, deep breath. When I opened the door, I saw a person I knew and didn't know at the same time. My father was standing there with a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. He was wearing blue jeans that were too new for him and a jacket that looked unfamiliar. His face had become so thin that his cheekbones cast shadows, and the wrinkles around his eyes had become real, not drawn on with respect. "Hello, Violet," he said, holding the gift carefully as if it might break. If I may. Just for a moment. I stepped aside and invited him inside. In the hallway, he tripped over the cat but didn't curse. He put the package on the table and stared at it for a long time, as if it were an object that needed to be named correctly before he could pick it up. Ethan offered his father a mug of tea, and he nodded, without saying thank you. But with the same shy gesture I remembered from my childhood, when he would drink water from the tap, tired, as if it were a secret that should not be shown to children. "This is for you," my father finally said, pushing the package toward me. I remembered one thing. "You once wanted it." I untied the string. Inside was an old book, an encyclopedia of dogs, with yellowed pages and illustrations that looked as if they had been copied from magazines from the middle of the last century. As a child, I took it out of the library again and again, imagining that one day I would know every breed by touch. Then the book disappeared from the shelves. It was lost, according to the librarians. I looked at the cover, my fingers sliding over the Cyrillic letters that had faded and become soft. "I found it in a second-hand store," my father muttered, embarrassed that his words lacked any grandeur. I thought that." He faltered and fell silent. We sat down. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon, tea was steaming, and the cat was rubbing against my father's shoe. I felt something growing inside me that had no name. There are words and language for insult, anger, regret, even liberation. But for the feeling when your childhood dream suddenly returns home in the hands of the person who once humiliated it, there are no words. There is only silence, into which the usual formulas fall. "Thank you," I said. "This is important." He nodded, took a sip of tea, and without looking up added, "I owe you more than a book." I waited for him to start explaining, justifying himself, mentioning those times, pressure from above, and I did it for my family. But he spoke differently, haltingly, as if he were learning a new language. "I sold the blueprints." Not because I was pressured, because I wanted to be valued even more. I wanted to get used to respectful looks and didn't know how to stop. I was flattered. I fell for it. When everything went wrong, I decided I could buy my way out as usual. It didn't work. I lost the court case. I lost you. He looked up and stared at me as if I were the final destination. I said those words in the restaurant. I said them to reaffirm my hierarchy once again. And do you know what truth I heard in my own voice? That I never had children, only projects to be evaluated. You left, and for the first time, I was left without an audience. The silence was deafening. I sat opposite him and felt something inside me clench and unclench, like a fist accustomed to defending itself. Next to me, Ethan took a pie out of the oven as if it were part of the conversation. Let's put something warm on the table between us so we don't burn each other. I remembered how a year ago my father came and asked Ethan to fix the papers. And for the first time in my life, I said no to him in a voice that people use when talking to people who are no longer in their power. Then he slammed the door, and the walls shook. Today he sat upright and held the mug with both hands. "Mom," he said suddenly and coughed as if he had swallowed dust from the road. "Linda filed for divorce. I didn't fight it. She showed me stacks of checks and bills. She did the right thing. I don't want her to live with my past. Margot won't answer the phone. She tells her friends that I'm a difficult subject for her now." "Mason." He fell silent and smiled that sad smile that looks like a bruise. "I know where he drinks. I parked nearby twice. I didn't go in. I don't know if he'll forgive me if I go in, or if he wants me there among his stains." "He needs himself," I said quietly, "but he can't get himself out. He needs someone nearby to endure his shame, not instead of him, nearby." "Will you go?" My father looked up. His eyes held the same question that was always masked by orders, now without the mask. "I'll go," I said, "but not today. Today it's your turn. Today is my birthday, and your chance to be a guest, not the host." Ethan placed the cake between us, and sweet steam rose into the air. We cut it carefully, and each piece looked like a little sun with brown rays. We ate in silence. Then my father asked permission to see me at work. Not today, but sometime when I was on duty. He said, "I want to see what your life is like, not from a report, not from words, but with my own eyes." I nodded. Part of me still remembered that old scene in the restaurant, that cold pride in his voice, but another part, new and flexible, was already able to accept things as they are. People sometimes learn to say, "I'm sorry," when they can no longer charm anyone. After lunch, we went out for a walk. Autumn spread leaves on the asphalt like old receipts, yellow, brown, fragile. My father walked slowly, looking at the windows of houses where other families lived with their holidays, silent resentments, and small compromises. He began to talk about roads, how the headlights of trucks on night highways resemble cosmic tales, how there is always someone at stations who knows the best shortcut for that very coffee, and how sometimes when it is very quiet, it seems that there is only you and your decisions around. I listened and thought that he was just practicing the truth, trying to speak directly without stilted frills. "I'm not asking for the past back," he said. "There's nowhere to return it to. I'm asking not to close the door to the future, even if there's a narrow corridor there." "The door is open," I replied, "but the hallway is small. We'll have to take off our shoes." He smiled. It was a new smile. There was no triumph in it, only acceptance of the rules which were not dictated by his pride, but by our shared experience. Margot arrived in the evening. She stood in the doorway wearing an almond-colored coat that resembled a newspaper clipping. She brought a bouquet that screamed pricey and a cake in a box from a trendy bakery. She turned away from her father as if he were a pungent spice. "I won't be long. I still have an event to attend." In the kitchen, she leaned toward me conspiratorially and said, "You understand. We've all suffered. You could ask Ethan, well, to help get at least part of it written off for Dad. You have connections. Do you realize that we are family?" I looked at her shiny lipstick and thought that the shadow in her eyes was from the constant lighting in other people's living rooms. "We are family," I said. "That's why we don't do dirty things for each other anymore." "That's what being an adult is, Margot." She grimaced, put the box on the table, and left, smelling of perfume that reminded me of office carpets. An hour later, I got a message from Mason. "Hey, I'm at a joint meeting. If I can make it through the week, I'll stop by. No promises." I replied with 3 words, "I believe in you." It wasn't heroism. It was reality. Faith sometimes lasts less than a week. When the 3 of us were alone again, I put a simple dinner on the table: lentil soup, cabbage salad, warm bread. My father picked up his spoon cautiously, as if he didn't want to disturb the familiar taste. We ate and talked about trivial things: my neighbor's cat who had learned to open the refrigerator, how Ethan breaks all the screw caps because he turns them too hard, how you can tell if there's a traffic jam ahead on the highway just by the way the lights from the trucks flicker. These conversations, in which no one competed, turned out to be better than any explanation. At night, my father got up. He asked permission to take a piece of pie with him. For the morning, with coffee in a thermos. I packed 2 for him. On the threshold, he crumpled his hat in his hands for a long time, just as he used to crumple my hair when I was a child, and fell asleep on his lap to the sound of the TV. Then he said, "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to allow me to be in your memory not only as a sentence. I want there to be a small room in it where I sit and am silent, but am there." "There is already such a room," I replied. "Only the light in it is not turned on by you." He nodded and walked down the stairs slowly, like people who are learning to trust the steps again. I closed the door, leaned my forehead against the cold wood, and felt an unfamiliar lightness. Not joy, something quieter, as if someone had taken an old cap off my shoulders and said, "Now you can go without it." Ethan and I washed the dishes. He dried his hands and pulled me close. "You're a good girl," he wanted to say, but he didn't, because we don't say words to each other that sound like lessons. He just hugged me, and the silence said everything that needed to be said. Before going to bed, I opened my father's book. My fingers touched a picture of a Dockerman, a dog with intelligent eyes, capable of pulling more than it seems. I traced a line across its muzzle and thought that in every family, there has always been someone who pulls. Not things, not money, but silence, responsibility, truth. I used to believe that this role was assigned to me as punishment. Now I know. I chose it myself when I refused to accept other people's rules. Outside the window, the leaves rustled softly. Somewhere in the city, Margot was probably telling another friend how difficult it was to move forward with the right choice of shoes for the right mood. Somewhere, Mason was probably taking a sip of water instead of beer and counting to 10. Somewhere, my mother was checking once again whether she had turned off the iron in my sister's apartment, where everything was marked by someone else's habits. And somewhere on the highway, my father stopped at a gas station, took my pie out of the bag, and maybe for a second, thought not about debts and courts, but about how my kitchen smelled of cinnamon and how the cat stubbornly rubbed against his shoe. Forgiveness is not a blank page. It is a notebook in which new lines appear alongside ink stains. They do not replace the old ones, but they give meaning to read on. I did not forget. I just opened a window and let in some fresh air. It made it colder, but it was easier to breathe. I put the book on the nightstand and turned off the light. And in the darkness, speaking more to myself than to anyone else, I thought, if family is not about blood or convenience, but about the ability to stay when someone breaks down, then isn't that ability worth more pride than any position? And are we ready to pay the price for it, not with someone else's choices, but with our own?